Join the Shot Talk Patreon at patreon.com/shottalk. You'll get access to bonus content, Q&A opportunities for future guests, and more. Thanks and enjoy.
But the stylized stuff, you have no reference for that, so you have to study like what is happening physically, what's the physics of this thing that's moving, and how could I exaggerate that? And like how can I make this action read clear? And then you start breaking the rig and breaking the rules.
Hey guys, this is Rodrigo and welcome to another episode of Shot Talk. This week we have the esteemed Joe Bowers. Glad you could make it.
Glad to be here.
Yes.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Always nice running into you, even on the regular. So most of these we're starting off with asking the guests a little bit of their background in terms of how they got into the industry. So
I guess I would say I was spending some time in community college. I was thinking I wanted to do computer science, and I realized I just really didn't have the passion for that, and I decided to pursue animation because I've always been doing animation as a kid. So at some point I decided to go to art school, and I thought, you know what, I think I want to work in games, and maybe I'll be a modeler or something. And I was doing a lot of modeling. I was building my own characters. I wanted to animate them, make like an animation reel, but I never really got good at the animation part. But I got good at the modeling part, and I was good enough to get hired by one of my teachers, who was James Stapp. He was like a modeler at Disney Animation.
That's cool.
And he hired me at his own company called Atomic Monkey to make models for fabrication, like 3D prototyping. Like you would 3D print a model and it'd be like a toy or whatever.
Yeah,
so, and I told James when I was there, I'm like, okay, I'm graduating. I'm gonna try to find a job wherever. I'm gonna like game companies. I was like talking to a few places. And he's like, well, let's see if we can, we're hiring modelers right now. Why don't you try there and we'll see if that's a fit. And I was like, yeah, okay, let's do that. Hell yeah, I get my foot in the door. And I applied and they were just like, yeah, come on in. I was like, holy shit. So
it's amazing. Half the time it feels as though they just have to know that they can sit in a room with you and not want to choke you. Like it feels oftentimes that
totally.
That's because getting a job anywhere is a big commitment, and having to work with anybody, ideally you get along with the person just fine. Yeah. But there's a situation where somebody, they're just maybe too self-centered, or maybe they're just too,
or they don't listen, they don't like feedback.
Right.
You do have
they think they know better all the time.
Yeah. Like a lot of artists get really attached to their work, and that's something you have to learn to like be open to that criticism. And usually the people that are really good, they're okay with taking feedback.
Right.
And changing things
because they want to get better.
Not falling in love with what they have. So when I was at Disney, I'm looking around. You're surrounded by really talented people, and I'm just like this kid out of school. My luck. I'm in Disney. It just seemed very improbable. From a few years ago, I didn't know what the hell I was doing, and I still felt like I didn't. So I'm like, my time here is limited. Like they're gonna figure out that I'm here, and they're gonna fire me. So I'm like, if I want to be an animator, I have to really like take all the rigs I can get my hands on, and just start doing tests and showing people. And that's what I would do at night. And I found, and everyone there was super nice.
So how was that just self-study animation in terms of learning the principles of it, or was there like looking at tutorials for 3D animation?
Well, there was a little bit I learned in 2D class. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of like what started, you kind of get a sense of it. But then I had the animation survival kit. I felt was the most useful thing because it broke down the principles and it showed you visually what spacing and timing is and poses.
Sorry, when people send you messages, like, hey, Bows, if I want to learn animation, like I don't know about you, but I normally say, hey, this is a pretty good book to start out with because it's just the mechanics of it, right? Like Richard Williams' animator survival kit is usually a pretty good starting point.
I would say so, yeah, because I felt like I know everyone loves Illusion of Life, it's a great book, but for me that was harder to use just to like, you just want to get in there and start doing something, and I felt like that book's more like you need to read through the book and kind of absorb the history of it and how it, there's
about 5 pages in that entire big Bible of animation where it actually talks about technical theory.
Yeah.
And it's all, like you said, it's buried within like these big lofty paragraphs.
Yeah, and it's fun to read, but it wasn't what I needed to like. I'm like, I don't get this idea, and I'm going through. I'm like, I don't know where to find it in this book, and I'm impatient. So I get this one. It's like page 5. There it is. So, yeah. When people ask me online, that's usually what I say. Like animation survival kit, and then get a rig or start drawing, get Flash or whatever, and just start doing it, and then find out what is getting in your way, and then attack these problems individually. Sometimes I do that and people just never say thanks, they never reply, because I think it's like, because I give them a big paragraph and they're just like, whoa, I thought this was going to be fun. This is
actually really hard.
Yeah. So, and then there's the people that are grateful,
Right.
And because they're like, I can't believe you responded. Thank you so much. And then that's
Right.
like, okay, it wasn't in vain,
Yeah, no, like
Yeah.
usually the guys who are I guess trying to be smart with a situation like where you get to talk to someone who's in the industry. Those like in your position when you were starting out, that usually is the kind of person that's going to end up in a spot. That is to say that they're taking advantage of the connection like that or whatever.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I've had people do that for me before, like for an hour, a Disney animator sat down and just like walked me through like the idea of inertia and drag and like just something that I wasn't doing in my work. And I'm like, oh yeah, when something moves, the heavier part is moving and maybe like the lighter part drags behind, it's delayed. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I started putting that in everything, and it still looked horrible, but it was something I was working out, I was refining, and like kind of figuring out how to make it feel right. And it took years to like get to a point where I felt like, okay, technically I can make this look okay now. And then it took longer to figure out, okay, now make a performance where it actually feels like they're alive and acting. So it's like 2 parts to it,
It's crazy how some people like Bluth will take the idea of overlap and because when I think of overlap, I think, oh, a character's ears that kind of do this, or some cloth or something that drags, but then they apply it to all sorts of like appendages in the face and sort of. It's more than just physics. It's more like what one thing leads and another thing follows, just for the sheer aesthetic of it. Even though it may not make sense in real life.
Yeah.
But like
it's appealing to see.
It's appealing to look at, and I know people kind of make fun of Don Bluth for doing that a little bit too much, but at least it makes it interesting to see some of his, because like in his older films, you'd have characters kind of walking, and it's like their eyebrows were almost bouncing as everything else was bouncing.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a bit much, but like it's interesting how you can apply these theories to all sorts of things.
Yeah, like squash and stretch applies to so much more than just a ball that physically squashes and stretches. And I've seen like breakdowns of how it's applied in different ways, and one is just like the silhouette itself. Like nothing is physically squashing or stretching, say on a rig, but the character is kind of like occupying this space, and then when they stand up, they go into a stretch.
Oh, sure.
So you're seeing like a contrast of a compression and extension in the silhouette, but it's not really, like they're not physically squashing. Like say it's a skinny guy, but you can do it, you can create that shape
Right,
language.
just the design of it, right?
Yeah, you're designing how the motion is moving from one pose to the next, and it's creating interest in the scene on top of a performance and whatever else is happening. And that's what I think makes good animation, is like, it feels like the thing is alive and it's interesting to watch. Mm-hmm. And sometimes when animation gets too realistic, I think you lose that interesting to watch. Mm-hmm. You might have that, wow, that looks so realistic, how'd they do that? But that wears off really quick.
Right,
but,
right. There's a fellow, and I'm not gonna name names here, but there was a fellow that I think we both knew at DreamWorks who was very much pushing towards the hyper-realistic motion. Mm-hmm. And I remember one day he was looking at student reels and sort of scoffing at them for saying, oh, look how broad and cartoony these are, this is so silly. But yeah, he was very much a realist. And I remember telling him, hey, these guys are trying to get jobs, and like you were saying earlier, you look at what the industry is doing and you try to emulate that, because you're not going to get hired unless you're already sort of in the same ballpark. So, Sony, Pixar, DreamWorks, Blue Sky, like they're looking for broad, appealing, designy animation that's appeals to a broad audience. So yeah, when he started to sort of nitpick at what good student reels were, I thought, no, you're not helping.
Yeah, don't turn those away.
Yeah, don't turn those away.
Because
Those are good. You need that.
yeah, and I think he might have not liked animation so much, perhaps. Like he liked more like that's almost like a VFX type. Like you're trying to make it look like mocap.
Right.
I mean, that is a place, but maybe more in live action. But I think it's great if you can exaggerate things. You could probably. I think that, well, I don't want to say it's harder. They're both difficult in their own ways, but making something look almost real the way it moves is really hard. But pushing something to more of a stylized motion and making it interesting is also hard, because what's easy about the realism is you have a clean reference. Like we know exactly what that should look like,
right.
and everyone's creeped out when you get it wrong. But
if you're a little off, right?
Yeah, but the stylized stuff, you have no reference for that, so you have to study like what is happening physically, what's the physics of this thing that's moving, and how could I exaggerate that, and how can I make this feel more punchy, or this, like how can I make this action read clear, and then you start breaking the rig and breaking the rules, like a character jumps and as they land, maybe their foot stretches out first, and you can see that contact, you can make things, or if someone's grabbing a cup of water, and you just do this realistically, but maybe there's one frame where the hand is twice as big.
Hyperextended.
Yeah, and your pose is like super like
wrapping
wide.
around.
Yeah, and you like read that hand grab, and the next frame is it's closed. And your mind goes, I felt that grab.
Yeah.
But if you do it like realistically, you didn't really feel that grab. You knew it happened, but it didn't have the fun that animation could bring to it.
That's the point. That's
the
where
art
you can
of it.
caricatures
Yeah.
life. I think, I forget the technical term, but I know in anime, there's, when they have the impossible cameras and the characters are doing like the crazy
like running at each other.
FLCL stuff. And but that's another prime example of that, of what you're talking about, where obviously that doesn't follow the rules of life, but it's so cool to look at, and it's so fun to watch it move.
It still has a believability to it versus realistic, and I think believability gets lost where it feels like it's working and it's following rules of something that's close to reality or near somewhere related to reality, but it has its own rules that it's following.
Right.
And you believe it because it's familiar.
That's usually why when a video game like Grand Theft Auto or what have you, if they do mocap, oftentimes it has that sort of floaty look, even though it is supposedly one-to-one to what the performance artist was doing, but it doesn't look as interesting. It doesn't look like it has the weight that you think it would, that when you see someone in real life doing, right?
There's an interesting thing about that. Like you see, if you take motion capture, perfect motion capture, and put it on a photoreal person walking around, that could be convincing. Like that's been done where it's like you can't tell that if that's real or not. I mean, you can't tell that that's CG, but if you do cartoony stuff on that character, then it looks wrong. But if you have like a cartoony character and you put the mocap on them, then that looks wrong. And suddenly it looks too slow, because when you see the realistic, like all the detail of realism versus the simplicity of a designed character, the expectations are different. You expect the character that's toon shaded or that's flat to move much different than you expect like a CG cinematic character to move, and there's like a spectrum of style, and there's like, you can only go so far with each style, the Zemeckis stuff earlier, Christmas Carol, they tried to make him move like the Jim Carrey.
Oh, the Jim Carrey, okay.
Because it's Jim Carrey, I don't know if there's a reason why he had to be very like cartoony, but he was weird proportion. They had overly detailed, and it just felt bizarre. I didn't watch the whole thing, but I saw clips. I'm like, this is kind of...
Couldn't make it through.
Yeah, it was like a good example. It's like, if you're going to go in that
nauseated.
direction, you have to follow certain rules. Like you can't... They're mixing and matching, and it felt almost like an experiment where now we can say that's why you don't do that.
Right. I wonder if Zemeckis was just like, I just want AC.
I was wondering, I've heard he just wants to like do dailies from his bedroom.
Yeah, exactly. I just want to be on my iPad and
Yeah.
No, I don't. Yeah. I mean, he did go back and do live action though eventually.
And wasn't it? What did he did? Like
he did The Wire, and he did the one with Denzel Washington
the Flight,
as a pilot.
Right?
Yeah, and that one was okay.
And I heard it was good. Like the difference being, I don't know what the difference is in his mind, but when he does the animation, it's like, ugh. But when you see the live action, it's like, holy shit, that's great.
I think it goes back to what we were talking about. If you don't understand, and I guess that is one of the 12 principles, so to speak, that Disney talked about, where it's the exaggeration bit, where you need to embellish it. Otherwise, you either get something that's not interesting enough, or even though it is true to life, it looks fake. because it's an animation, because you're using a stylized character, et cetera, et cetera.
Something is off in your mind. Your mind won't let you accept it. It's weird. Like there's.
It's funny because when you were talking about this, I started thinking about Glenn Keane, because he's kind of the master at that. Like he knows how to add that little extra oomph to any little scene, right? And I know you had a chance to work with that guy on Tangled, right?
It's actually interesting too, because you would see when he would draw a picture of like Rapunzel, the drawings, and he would do a lot of demos of how he draws it, and there's so much he would leave out, and he would just hit these certain landmarks on the face where you're like, there it is, there she is, you can see it. And sometimes like when he's drawing the mouth, you would see he just like darkens in the corners, and then it's like to define the teeth in the mouth. Like it's not.
Kind of just the corners of the mouth, maybe?
Yeah, or you just see like some landmarks on the face, the eyes, like you're just hitting these little landmarks that, and it's just like magic the way it's coming together. And then you see that and like, wow, that's so appealing. How do we do that in CG? And it's like, well, in CG, like the nature of it, because we simulate lighting and everything, we have to get this full, like, we have to see all the detail that he's not drawing. So I felt like we found a way to make that work on Tangled. I say they, like, you know,
sure.
The modelers, the designers, Glenn was helping with that, like the lighting, you know, it wasn't too detailed if you look at it, and it was very pushed animation.
That movie was really refreshing for me at the time, because that is something that DreamWorks, at least back in the day, was pretty guilty of, is that they would hyper texturize their characters, and when you start to get that level of detail, that's when you start seeping into the uncanny valley stuff.
Yeah.
And so between Pixar, and especially with that movie with Disney, I thought, wow, now we're getting back to this designed, appealing aesthetic.
It was almost like something clicked with CG, where it's like CG can do this too if we just design around and plan for it. And I mean, it wasn't easy to get there. It felt like a long process from Bolt to Tangled. Like there was a year gap between productions, you know. And
when people tell me that they want to make a homemade animated short, and they're thinking about doing it in 3D, I always say that you're going to get a lot more bang for your buck if you do it in 2D, because a drawing inherently is more interesting to look at, because it has this sort of like tactile analog quality, versus if you're doing CG, you have to really go out of your way to make it look organic.
Yeah.
And that's the struggle, right? Every step of the process, the modeling, the lighting, the rigging, the animation.
You have to be an expert on all of them.
Yeah,
almost.
if you want it to look sort of...
If you want to hit that quality bar. And then with 2D, you could do, you animate on 2s. You can get more across with less.
Yeah.
And then when it's CG, you have to animate on 1s, and getting that subtle performance on 1s, it's more work, it's more like, it's harder. I mean, they're both hard in different ways, but CG subtle performance is it just requires more.
It's just polish.
More
right?
polish. That's more polish. And then the 2D, it's like that's hard in different ways. Like I'm not very good. I wouldn't be able to animate like Rapunzel in 2D, right? But if I had the drawing skill, still, it's like you're trying to get more across with, but you can't do it on 1s. You know, I mean, maybe every once in a while you have a few frames on 1s, but
I feel like you go to a film festival and have somebody who didn't even color a 2D short, and it's like animated on 3s or 4s, and it's still really interesting and neat to look at. Yeah. But then you have somebody come in with like a CG rudimentary shapes with like blend shader, like the most basic shit, like that won't make it to the festival because it's just too hard to look at. But you can get away with a lot less, right, with 2D stuff. So
yeah, as long as the drawings, the designs, everything is like, that's what really has to shine through. And you can cheat with like your model, like a character looking at you this way, when they turn to the side, like how they turn, the design of the character doesn't have to be consistent to a real world model or a real virtual model. Mm-hmm. So there's things that you can take liberties with that people love, like, wow, it looks so appealing from every angle because you could draw it that way. But it's in 3D, so this was like a thing we were struggling with on Rapunzel, on Tangled. It used to be called Rapunzel.
Were you on it when it was still Rapunzel?
Yeah, okay. I mean, near the end, I think is when they actually changed it. It was like a marketing decision.
Sure.
For whatever reason, but.
Because people can't handle that many syllables, apparently.
I thought the name Rapunzel's fine, but I think it was something about, they measure demographics and see who people from this age range will watch.
Everybody's got hair.
Yeah, no one wants it. The boys don't want to see Rapunzel, but they'll watch something called Tangled, maybe. I don't know.
Right.
But,
everybody gets that.
Yeah. What was I saying?
Oh, sorry. So you're saying, that's a good question.
I was going with Oh, okay, I remember. So one thing that we were struggling with was they had like if Bolt quality bar, Meet the Robinsons and Bolt was here, Tangled quality bar, that the director's expectation was like here.
Oh, dang. Yeah.
And at the time you hate him for it, but in the end you appreciate it, but it was something we had never done at the studio there, so everyone's struggling to get these 3D characters to have the appeal of 2D. And it's in the model, the rigs are capable, it's just we would pose something and you'd spend like an hour making a pose, right? Trying to find that starting pose. And then Glenn would come by and you're like, I think that looks great, and then he looks at it, he's like, yeah, well, let's see. And then he takes a stylus and he's super.
Eye of God.
Yeah, it was always like great when he would come by because he was just like this warm, friendly person who always made you feel good, even if he completely changes everything, because you're learning while he's doing it. So you're just like grateful for all the like drawing everything, So he would draw like over the pose and push it, and you're like, right. That's so, and he's like, can you do that? And you're like, I don't know, I'm gonna try. So you would try to match that drawing, and then he would keep pushing it. And at some point he said, like, I think he was, I forget, I'm paraphrasing how he said it, but he said it takes a long time for it just to look like okay. You know what I mean? And it takes, see, in 2D when he draws the first drawing, it's so fast to draw out poses, he could like iterate super fast and he can make it really appealing faster. But for us, you iterate slower on your pose because the rig is slow, perhaps.
Yeah, you're fighting against
technical things. Yeah,
right.
So your eye would get used to what looked mediocre, and he would remind you, this can be so much better. Let me draw over it quickly because I've been staring at the screen like you have for hours. And that was kind of what made Tangle work, because he was drawing over in dailies every shot. You need help, you'd ask him, he'd come to your desk, he would generously give you feedback, and draw over everything. And that really pushed everyone to realize, oh shit, we could do way better with this. So
when you said he used to draw over, do you mean that he had like a Cintiq and
we all had like Wacom styluses, and then in dailies he had a Cintiq. So the director would be saying, I don't know, what if it was something more like this? And people are like what? I don't know, like what's this? And then Glenn starts drawing these versions, like what about this? Or he would come up with an idea, and the director would,
that's cool.
Yeah, that, do that. And you're like, oh, okay, that. I get that. I get that. It's a drawing.
So you do that real time during dailies in front of everybody.
The best dailies
awesome.
Process of it was the most efficient dailies I've ever been in as far as getting information across of what you want, because it's illustrated versus, I don't know, if you ever had someone say like, wow, right now your shot looks kind of like this, and I think you should make it look like this. And you're like, well, you did the same thing. What is that? I don't know what that is. It's like what they're thinking isn't translating well, and if they can draw, it's just like, it translates better.
The clarity.
Yeah. It's super clear, yeah. So
that's something that Adam, I don't know if you've met Adam, but we had him on here a couple weeks ago, and he talked about, because he's a supervising director on SpongeBob, and he talks about that's the number one thing is making sure that what's in here is translating to the team.
Yeah.
And that's the nature of that's in his job descriptions, is just drawing, because the show is obviously in 2D. So that goes a long way for him to not just, like you said, actually
but to draw
spell
it out
and be like,
I think it just saves time and money, if you want to think of it that way. If someone could just draw what they mean.
Glenn Keane, he's been doing this for 30 years now, hasn't he?
He was trained by the original 9 Old Men. He came in. They passed the torch to his group that came in. So
right. So I feel like you have Glenn Keane, James Baxter, Andreas Deja, just like a handful of guys they're not obviously as I don't know, like the saints of the way we sort of canonize the original.
Yeah, I've heard people say, who are the next 9 Old Men? It's like, we don't need 9. It's just you've got this generation that kind of was after them, and like Dale Bear, is amazing. There's actually a lot of them just became directors too, didn't they? It was like Ron and John. Tim Burton was in that group.
Oh yeah,
yeah. He was like an animator, and
Brad Bird.
He had a different direction. I don't know.
His story's funny because he hated working on The Fox and the Hound, right? And then,
Totally makes sense. If you
Yeah.
see where his work and what he wants to do. It's
Can you imagine Tim Burton trying to stay on model for a cute fuzzy fox?
no, he would want it to turn into a beast or
right,
something
having
evil.
blood firing out of his eyeballs.
Yeah,
or
yeah,
whatever.
just something to protest that this
Right.
conformity that he's given.
Conformity.
He's like, fuck, I'm gonna go hide in the closet.
I'm gonna draw a picture of a guy with scissors for hands.
Yeah, you'll see. I'll show you. It's like, Tim.
Tim, you're weird.
Yeah, you're not gonna get anywhere with that rebellious attitude.
God, so where were we?
So how I got into the industry, I don't know. I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean,
it was a short ending, but like basically showing the work to different animators, getting that feedback, and showing them like, I'm passionate about this. I take your feedback and I can make it better, and like proving that over a few years. It was like 2 years, and then I got into like an assistant, and then I became like eventually just like a full animator.
You know, it's funny that you talk about Glenn's process, because I remember when you came over to DreamWorks, it was you and Joe Sandstrom.
Yeah.
I always thought like, oh, it's the Joes from Disney.
We got that a lot.
And yeah. Well, now you're an individual.
Thank you.
After
Yeah.
it took a long time, but now I see you as Joe Bowers.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. But I remember I would work on shots, and Sandstrom would come by, and he had this sort of. He might have been emulating Glenn Keane because of the way he was like, it's good. It just you really need to stretch it a little bit more this way. And yeah, it would more often than not, it would make my stuff way better. So yeah, I wonder if he sort of rubbed off on him and he passed it along.
Yeah, there was something he would do when he was
Sandstrom or Glenn Keane?
Glenn Keane. Yeah, he would. You would see. You could almost tell his. You could almost understand his process. I want to say thought process, like how he approaches. It's hard to say thought process, but because he would act things out in front of you, but it was just like you shoot reference and you study it and like, oh, I want to do this. Like when he's drawing, he would start to he starts kind of okay. It's kind of maybe he's like in this. He's like
miming it, right?
Like he's miming it as he's drawing it. So he's like, there's even characters of it I think where he's just like, But he would start to embody. You could tell that he was trying to feel what it felt like to be that character, and then he's like putting that on the paper, and it was like, I kind of get it, like that. It's like a feeling, like you're trying to really get into the mind of the character, or at least the feeling you're trying to convey. And if you can't do that, like if you're working on a shot and you don't know what that feeling is, then you haven't figured out the shot yet, perhaps. You're like, I don't know, he just says this. It's like, well, how does he feel when he says that? And you're like, fuck, I didn't ask myself that question.
Right.
Maybe
So every character is doing this.
Yeah,
kind of
and that's why you see so many don't do this, so many student reels. This is the acting, and I'm like, if I see that next, right?
Right.
But if I see like as they're talking or they're about to say something, I could see a thought, and there's subtext behind that thought, like they're hesitant or they're sad or they're kind of like there's an emotion there you can understand, and then they say something.
Showing a character thinking.
Magic,
yeah.
Yeah, and then they say something, and it's like, well, you said this, but it looks like you really mean that. Like, wow, it's almost like you're lying. There's subtext behind what you're saying. It's like that's a real person almost, because people do that, right?
I don't know if Chris Capel ever told you stories about B Movie, but
I remember his goodbye email, but
I
don't know if I should talk about. I don't know if I should talk about that.
But no, he told me about the production, how they had Seinfeld basically directing that film, even though he didn't get directing credit.
Oh, he didn't.
But you know how DreamWorks had that sort of star fucker quality where I guess Hollywood's kind of like that in general, but
it's more of a marketing decision to have like the big name that promotes the film.
Right, but even on campus, during production, they would put him in charge of giving notes to the animators. And this is and you think like anybody with half a brain says, if you don't know how animation works or the technicalities of it, why do you give it to a guy who's really good at something else? You know what I mean? So he'd come in and things would be in blocking, so the character would be kind of like popping from pose to pose.
Make it smoother.
And he'd be like, what's the deal? No, he'd be like, I don't understand why this isn't. Why does it look this way? So a lot of inefficiency I heard in the process. But not only that, going back to the acting, like you were talking about, oftentimes he would encourage this kind of like W pose where, but if you think about it, that's very Seinfeldian, you know. This is sort of what's going on, and I think
but it's sitcom type stuff.
It is kind of a little stagey, a little hacky.
Yeah, it's not.
But I've only seen B-Movie once, but I kind of want to go back and see if we see.
I just remember he's like, "What's up with honey? Why are we into it? What's the deal? What's the deal? I don't know." Yeah.
But yeah, again, that's, and like you almost can't fault Seinfeld because, you know, I don't even think a regular actor is going to think about that on that level of detail of my hand goes here, my shoulder goes here. Like they're hopefully the body is reflecting, you know, something natural that's in their head already. Right?
Yeah. Like it's just like real life when you're interacting with people and you're not thinking about how your body is behaving, but that's what you're trying to put into the animation is what feels like natural for what's happening in the scene, and it's all based on how you feel and what your goal is and what you're trying to do in the scene. You know, like we've had actors come in and do talks on here's how we approach acting, you know, and it's never like, it's always just like they're trying to get into the feeling of what it's like to be in the moment of that character and how that character reacts to that situation. And then they just start behaving. It starts internally and it kind of comes out. And then this is a secondary response to what they're feeling.
Right.
And if you can do that in your reference, and then you look at it and you're like, you study it, you're surprised and like, whoa, I did this little thing with my head, or I did this thing with my arm. Like I could put that in the shot. Yeah. And so you take a few takes, you can mix them together, and then you have this performance, and you do something that feels very natural, but maybe you exaggerate it more. You know, I think it's harder to do, but if I would encourage anyone that's learning the animation to go in that direction versus thinking, well, what do I do if they hands? I don't know. Well, maybe have it go up, or maybe have it, you know, maybe I'll do this when I'm talking, or do that. It's like, why? You got to think about why your hands are doing this. And
that's the danger of CG2 versus 2D, is that you can noodle the hell out of poses in CG. Because when I was learning CG animation for the first time, I would start off with the best intentions where I film myself and I would do a gesture, but then as I started polishing, I started being like, what if I had it like this? Or what if I had it like this? Or what if I had it like this? And all of a sudden the focus was, I lost what was important, right?
Yeah.
So then you have to take a step back and be like, okay, now I'm noodling something that is not the essence of what the shot should be.
Yeah, it's not about this. It's about, you know.
It's about the whole thing working together, right?
Yeah, it's about the whole. Yeah, and I used to do that a lot. I'd spin off into the parts, and you're like,
yeah.
And then fuck it, the whole day's gone. You delete the keys, and you go home. You go home and you feel bad.
And you're like, ah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you started at Disney, found your way to DreamWorks, and then from DreamWorks, what was the last movie you were on for that? Was it the Guardians? Or
full movie was How to Train Your Dragons 2.
Oh, cool.
And then it was, I don't remember all of it, but it was like, I was like helping finish a lot of movies. So it's like the last months of Penguins 3. Penguins 3? No, Penguins. The last, a few shots on Panda, do a little bit on Turbo, might have been before Dragons. Boo, you're on Boo now. Okay, cool. Boo's canceled. Oh, okay. Trolls, you're on Trolls. I'm like, okay. And that was going on for maybe about 6 months. And I was like, I wonder what else is out there. Because you're kind of like at the end helping projects finish. I got stuck in a loop. So.
Right. I mean, and we're both pretty big gamers. So I'm sure you were like, well, this League of Legends is fun. I wonder if they're looking for.
Yeah, so it was like a nice change up because they contacted me and they're like, hey.
This is Riot Games.
Riot
I don't know
Games.
if we actually have said that. Yes.
This is Riot Games,
yes.
Yeah, so Riot Games contacted me and they're like, we want to do cinematic stuff internally, right? And they're like, we have this game. And I'm like, oh, that looks crazy. And then we have all these champions. It's kind of like a Marvel universe with heroes, right? And we want to make stories about them. I'm like, and they said the tone, we want it to be a little bit more mature, like maybe teens and up as far as the demographic, right? So you could have more violence. It's not targeting family and kids and whatever, or younger audiences, I guess.
So that must have been appealing to you because
that was super appealing
because you've been doing family-friendly stuff for a while.
The whole time,
yeah.
and it's great in the beginning, but it starts to kind of wear on you when that's the only genre. Because animation isn't really a genre; it's just the form that you tell the story. And in at least
I think it's because it's so expensive they make it safe. That's
the wide appeal is makes the most money, and
supposedly.
In theory, yeah.
In theory.
But it's frustrating when you're an animator and you're getting older and you kind of like, I'm starting to make things maybe, like, I don't know, I would watch that one, but most of these I wouldn't watch. So it's like Dragons, I would watch that, but this one feels like it's for people that are 10 years younger than me. You know, I felt like I was outgrowing the young audience as an audience member. So that was super appealing when they're like, we gonna do like stuff that's a little bit more serious, not serious is the wrong word, more adult. That's a loaded word too. Not adult, but like they wanted to do something more mature. That's a better.
Right.
So
Shrek porn.
Like Shrek, yeah.
Shrek. I get you.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying.
I get you. Before you did any of this, and I include myself in this too, there was that Newgrounds time when we were sort of uploading and playing around with stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember when you came in to DreamWorks, and I had I had the little Newgrounds sticker on my cubicle.
It was like a flare,
like a
asking
little
for
like
help.
a little SOS. Like,
is anyone else here like have my sensibilities?
Yeah, I'm really sick of Kung Fu Panda 2. Somebody please, like.
But
yeah,
everyone was a little Tank Man.
And you were the first guy, and maybe the only guy at DreamWorks that knew what Newgrounds was. And then I checked out your stuff, and it had this sort of Monty Python, just silly, crazy, violent, absurd quality. And I was like, oh, this guy. All right, this guy's cool. Like, we
can do this. Yeah, we can hang out.
So you know, when you said that Riot was doing stuff that was more interesting, I couldn't help but remember. Like the stuff that you would do for fun back in the day.
Yeah, and a little less now. It gets, you know, you need a lot of time to do that stuff. But that was also, I felt like that was kind of that kind of comes out of frustration too when you're always making like it's great working on production where you're making someone else's film. Right. And you're doing it as a team, and it is very rewarding. It's like this person has a vision, we're following that vision, and hopefully when it comes out, it's great, and you like participated in that. And that's awesome, right? But after a while, you're like, I'd like to do something, and now it's hard to say. Here's a pitch. I want to be a director at DreamWorks. Make my movie. They're like, yeah, what? You know, it's really hard to get into that position. I don't know how you get there. There's many paths, I'm sure, but now it's like, I can animate. I'm gonna go home and animate something and just put it on YouTube and find an audience, and that's what you've been doing. And I started doing some of it before DreamWorks, but then I just I started, I guess, getting the audience, people noticing your work, you kind of got encouraged to do more.
Absolutely.
And even if it was just like...
People are hungry for new stuff, man.
Yeah, and it's refreshing.
That's the great, I mean, earlier we were joking around how like safe stuff makes the most money, but, and again, this is a topic we talked about with Adam, where it's like, the minute that somebody has the balls to do something different and it's of quality, that's usually catches like fire. It's almost like when like at superhero movies, everyone was doing a pretty good product with the Marvel films, and then someone does a rated R, Deadpool 1 that actually works, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I didn't know we could go there. I didn't know we could. Have the main character sodomized and then still make, 200 million, 300 million domestic, or however much it made. You know what I mean? So
I forgot about this.
That's always encouraging. When you go home and you do stuff that you find interesting, and then all of a sudden you find an audience that goes, that's fucking cool.
And I think there's people out there hungry for it because that's something they weren't normally getting from a studio that has so much on the line for their product, right? So they can't risk making like a joke about a video game and that's what the short is. It's not even a story. It's like I'm just like making a joke out of an experience I had playing Skyrim, right? And it blew up into something, where now it's like its own little character, and it's like almost nothing to do with Skyrim really. Like it could be separated from it, but you couldn't get that anywhere else.
Joe Bowers, will there be a Doba Bear 5?
Doba Bear 5? I haven't started anything.
You heard it here first.
Yeah. I always try to break it up, do something between Dova Bears, but I think if I did another one, it would be more of a put together story that could be a pilot.
Oh, cool.
To pitch, and it wouldn't be Dova Bear, but it'd be Dova. You know what I mean? It's like the same character, but get rid of the Skyrim part and just make it like
I think people,
a Viking world, right?
I was going to say, I think people just like to see a bear with a sword.
Yeah, initially it got the focus because it was Skyrim,
right? And
that was hot at the time. But now the people that stuck around are like, I love that bear, So I think that character I could do something with. I should kill him off.
You should just upset the entire internet.
Subvert their expectations.
Yes, do Game of Thrones style. Have him in a wedding and then get stabbed in the head.
I'll have him astral project himself into another place and then he fights a guy for a while, and then he disappears, and then
he brushes his
and then he's staring at the binary stars, and then he fades away to everyone's disappointment.
Yep. Well, I'm glad we got the inside scoop here at Shot Talk. What were we talking about?
I don't know. We're talking about Newgrounds stuff.
Yeah, Newgrounds, man. Yeah, that makes me hopeful that there's, specifically about Newgrounds, it feels that everybody talks about 2005-ish when Newgrounds was really, really big before YouTube came in and sort of took a lot of the content creation. But it feels though now that there's like this new generation of kids that are, and that it kind of goes back to what we were talking about, where back in the day, you had to get your hands on Richard Williams' animator survival kit. You had to sort of decipher the illusion of life. Yeah. And nowadays, there's a wealth of information out there.
The kid they'll just email you. Yeah. It's like, hey, could you, Nathan?
By the way, word to the wise, if you want to email someone who you think is like too much of a big shot and then you think they wouldn't have time for you, email them, because they oftentimes, especially artists and especially animators, that's part of what's fulfilling about being an artist, is getting to pass on information to another generation or another person who's willing to learn. Like, that's really important. So it's mutually beneficial, I would say.
I mean, we were both, I think, contacted by Fantashow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nathan, for his project, and he just wanted
some feedback.
Once a few months, just give me, what do you think, feedback notes, whatever. And it was like, I think he found it very helpful. And that's the thing about this new generation coming, is they're really freaking talented. And like at his age, I mean, go look at Newgrounds, what my animation looked like in 2001. Right. I was 21 years old, and I can't. Yeah, it's terrible.
No, my early stuff is really rough compared to, like, I met this guy. His alias is Ivan Almighty.
Ivan. I met Ivan.
Ivan, yeah. I saw him. We went down to Pico Day, and
I remember.
I think he was about 18 years old.
He was 17 or 18.
17 or 18.
Because you had seen his work, and it's just like, this is almost like professional. Like,
it's better than
you're
TV.
On your way, kid, and then you meet him, and you're like, are you still in high school? Right. Like, and you're already at that level.
Put that beer down. What are you doing?
Yeah, it's like, what the fuck are you doing? But now you look at what he's doing now, and it's already like, it keeps getting better, and and I'm like, man.
So it makes me optimistic that. You know, as much dread and annoyance that the internet causes, there is the positive side.
So you're saying we should keep it?
Yeah, I think we should keep the internet.
Should we agree to keep the internet?
There are people who use it for good more than evil, and that is one of the things I've noticed, is that young people today are picking up stuff so much faster. And not only that, but they have the advantage of downloading digital movies and sort of frame by framing stuff, which is like back in the day, I would take VHSs and I would use the slow function. So I'd have this fucking interpolated frame of like Yakko, who's like geek, 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 and I'd sit there and be like, oh, okay, I think I see what a smear frame looks like.
I used to do that too with The Simpsons. Sometimes I would there's a button that lets you go incrementally. But I mean,
you see like the static and the tracking lines.
It's terrible. Yeah, it was.
But now you can just go.
We were so hungry, we couldn't. Like, remember what I told you? One guy comes from CalArts and gives a talk for an hour, and it changes everything about how I think about 3D workflow. Right? Just one of many lessons I could have gotten. And nowadays, kids on the internet can get like 1 million times amount of that information just by going on YouTube and doing a search. Like, they can. They're not, nothing's in their way at this point. They have no excuse if they have the passion and a little bit of, I don't want to say talent, because I feel like it's more hard work and passion than talent. I think talent kind of gets you a little bit of a start sometimes, but if you're not considered talented, you could still get there. I don't think I was very talented in art, but I was hungry to do it, you know. So if you have a little bit of that, like you have all the resources you need, whereas we were so limited.
Yeah.
And like I'm just like, what would have happened if I had YouTube and all these, you know, Adam Phillips tutorials or whatever for like.
God, I remember that
Toon
guy.
Boom. Yeah, he blew my mind in 2005, I think. The first time I saw Flash treated like an actual 2D, like proper 2D with the bitey stuff. I was like,
I didn't know that Flash could do that. It completely blew my mind.
Because I mean, Newgrounds I was on 2001, and everything was like the Flash cartoon was kind of defined, and then it was that thing where it's like, I didn't know we could do that. And suddenly it just opened up, and you started to see more people.
For people who don't know, Adam Phillips was a former Disney Australia animator. and he did the Body of Brackenwood series, which was monumental for the Flash community, especially on Newgrounds. Yeah. That was always sort of that unattainable perfection that, you know, a 15-year-old me was like, wow, that's something crazy. He had moving cameras
and shit. Like, it was just stuff you'd unseen, you know, and he had the most awesome music to this going. It was the whole production.
Did he compose the music? I don't remember.
Either he did or he had a friend.
Okay.
Usually it's in the credits, but I was at Disney at the time. I just started, and I'm like trying to get into animation, and I saw that, and my jaw drops. And it was also like, there was something refreshing that the style was not a Disney style necessarily, like it was his own style. And that was very appealing because the Disney style kind of was the main thing you see when you see like quality animation examples.
Right.
Unless you go to like Japan and you find some like the pencil test for Akira, then your like mind gets blown in a completely new realm. But
I think that's what Brad Bird was trying to push, because he was a big proponent of not calling animation a genre.
Yeah.
Because when you do that, you say, oh, it needs to be rated G, it needs to be family friendly.
Yeah.
And I think that's why he started, or at least attempted, to make animation be taken more seriously with The Iron Giant. Granted, it's not like that was a R-rated movie or anything, but like it had that quality of being filmic, and there was just things about that film that felt more adult, and even it wasn't even squeaky clean even with language.
Yeah.
And
it was kind of off the formula of it wasn't traditional, perhaps.
Right. And I remember he apparently during production of that film, the studio wanted him to sort of fall in line and do what Disney was doing, because it was it Turner or was it Warner Brothers? I know it wasn't Disney that was producing that film, but he would feed them, the executives, he would feed them fake scripts that had musical numbers written into the script.
Really?
And meanwhile, he was there making his little baby, which is part of the reason that when that film came out, they tried to kill it, because Brad Bird was, you know, defiant. And thankfully, because I feel usually when something's good, it eventually will find its legs.
Yeah.
And I think Iron Giant's a good example of that. So.
I've heard of that in other, I won't say where, but I don't know if it even matters, but I've heard of really good directors that will, when they put the storyboard animatic up for viewing an animated film, they would add extra dialogue to describe what's happening. Because the executives they don't understand a silent moment, or they don't understand that this will be conveyed to the performance silently. So they have them, oh, I don't feel good. You know, whatever. I don't know.
There's a tear going down my face.
Yeah, I'm sad. Like, I can't think of an example. I just heard that this was done. A director would do this, and then after they're like, cool, they would take it out. And then when they would see it again, it would be in animated form, and they're just like,
you could just see Simba going like, my dad is dead.
Yeah.
My dad is dead.
Wake up, don't be dead. I'm sad now. You know,
I am an orphan.
Yeah, it's like,
I'm crying.
But because there's not all executives, like some know how to read a script.
It is a stereotype for a reason.
Yeah, it is, because like some know how to read a script, some know how to see blocking, perhaps, you know, like if they're experienced in the industry, but some don't know what, like you said, they don't know what they're looking at.
Right.
Like the Seinfeld thing, like what?
And you
why
can't,
are they
and you
moving
can't,
the steps,
again, you
you know?
can't blame the guy.
No, it's
like
just it's a lack of understanding of the process, and it's sad that you have to like kind of hack it to get that to work, but
well, that is something that I've noticed, that oftentimes when you have a former film director like Spielberg, or even an actor like Ryan Reynolds, and they come in and then they start wearing the producer hat, not always, but sometimes that does help a lot, because they understand it, because they've been in the trenches, and they can sort of have the foresight to understand that where something might be going, even if it's still pretty rough, you know. And again, you know, not every executive, but that does happen a lot, where they'll kill something that could be filmic for fear of the ideas not being, not bonking the audience on the head.
And it's because there's so much money involved in making these things, and it's hard for them to just trust this director's vision. And to be fair, some directors aren't very good with their vision, or they're not like, they don't stick to the vision. Maybe some can be pushed around a bit, like by suggestions, and they don't have a strong vision. But when you have some directors that have a strong vision, just follow it and trust that it's going to be what they say it's going to be, because hopefully they're proven they can do that.
Right.
But it's a hard thing to trust. I
It's
guess,
super hard. No,
especially if you're a business person. You're
and money's on the line.
and
for
that's
sure.
always kind of like the big clash that you'll always hear people complain about in studio animation world, right? Is that conflict between business and art, but it's necessary, and hopefully it's a balanced relationship, ideally.
Right. I always think films are like pizza, where every ingredient has to be right, obviously, and that's why there's such few good, super amazing films, because there's always going to be like, oh, well, the pepperoni was awful in that, or the cheese was awful in that. But that one, everything came together amazingly well. Like the script, the acting, the performance, the cinematography, and even the production, like where maybe the director producer had a good relationship and they understood each other, and all of a sudden that lends itself to making that amazing, put together meal. So
And
that's a rare thing.
it is a director that knows exactly what they want, and they know what they're going for. They have a vision, and they know how to get people to help them make that. That is rare, and I felt How to Train Your Dragons is a good example where that works. Our relationship with Dean, the director, was in Daly's animation. He sees a shot, and Simon Otto, who's like the head of character animation, they call it Hoka.
Yeah.
Little
I think that's a
inside
DreamWorks,
knowledge.
I think that's a DreamWorks term.
That's just a DreamWorks thing, yeah.
Yeah.
He's the guy that's giving you most of the animation feedback, and he's drawing over the shots, and it's very helpful. And Dean is just saying things that a director should worry about. So Dean doesn't say, maybe you should check your arcs here and your timing here. Dean's just like, in this scene, he needs to be upset about this, and he wants to do this. He's looking at the big picture of the shot, like the way you'd tell an actor, you're not micromanaging how they do the performance. You're saying this idea needs to come across, and then Simon would be like, check your spacing here, or check your timing here, or maybe you need to exaggerate this one expression. He'll give you all the animation notes you need. So you're getting your animation notes from an animator, and you're getting the direction of the shot as a whole from the director, and it was a perfect experience, I think.
You're doing something right, Joe.
There's cheering outside. I felt like that's kind of an ideal setup.
Yeah, it's funny because I know that a lot of film directors, like with Tarantino or Paul Thomas Anderson back in the 90s, where they would often struggle with that sort of producer-director relationship, and then along came that one person who understood what they were going for and was like, I got your back. I'm going to make sure that I can at least help you preserve some of your vision. So yeah, it is a very fortunate thing when that happens. And then like you said, you need to have somebody minding all the other parts, so all the other parts come together pretty nicely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you ever see behind the scenes DVD of Incredibles, the production, where Brad
Yeah,
Bird
that's one of my favorite behind the scenes.
He's just fighting the producers,
Yeah.
yelling at each other, and they're you can tell they're cool with each other, but he's just fighting for his vision, and the producer's just it's not possible. He's money, reality, and he's vision, story, the art, the business, and it turned out great.
It did. I think
they had to balance each other out.
No, I think I love that, because I feel also too that because he's so brazen and so open about his intentions, that helps. You need that sort of open dialogue, otherwise things go unsaid, and all of a sudden you make compromises.
Yeah.
And Brad, if anything, Brad Bird's good at sort of taking the quietest person in the room and shaking him up and riling him up and having him say something.
You have to be, I guess you can't be afraid to be blunt and to even hurt people's feelings, which is, you just can't, there's no time for that. You just get it, you just say what needs to be said, because something goes unsaid for too long.
I don't know if there was a couple guys at DreamWorks who had worked on the Iron Giant, and they had a couple stories about what that process was like. And one of the ones that I liked the most is that there was a daily session where Brad was showing a shot, and he didn't say who the artist was who had animated the shot. And he says, "So what do you guys think?" It was just a absolute radio silence. And Brad Bird was getting kind of annoyed. He's like, "No, what do you guys think? I want to know what needs to be better about this shot." So he sort of coerced people into talking. Yeah. And animators, a lot of animators tend to be pretty quiet people. So anyway, so then Brad Bird's like, okay, great, and starts getting feedback, and then he starts critiquing it himself. And then the big reveal at the end was that it was his shot. It was Brad's shot.
Oh, really?
Something that he was animating on. But he
He's
was
like,
sort
you're
of
all fired.
I know, get out. No,
Yeah.
but the point
You
was
failed
is
the
that,
test.
Is that he was making a good point. It's like people need to be honest and providing that feedback, and even somebody in his position needs to always be trying to take feedback from wherever it comes from, especially if it's from like people that are talented and that you can trust and this and that. So
yeah,
I
think
thought that was cool.
Feedback is super important. Just even if it's bad feedback, it's just like say if it's someone who isn't experienced in animation, but you get a reaction. It's more of a reaction type of feedback.
Totally.
And you're like, I don't know, that doesn't seem to, there's something wrong here, and you're like thinking, there's nothing wrong, what do you know? You're not an animator, but that's still legit because it's like, okay, you reacted to something.
Well, they're the audience.
You're the audience, and something doesn't
audience.
feel right. My wife does that when Heidi does that when I'm animating something. I like, hey, look at this. And she's like, she's super blind. She's like, that looks weird. And I'm like, what looks weird? And I start stepping through. I'm like, is it here? Is it here? And I play it, and she's like, there, that feels weird. And I'm like, oh fuck, there's like a hitch there, there's spacing, something was wrong, and I was able to find it. She didn't know what it was, but she, as an audience, she could tell something was wrong.
That's something that I've done a lot where, in fact, I think with feedback, a diverse pool of people that a lot of them not even artists that can just give you that sort of feeling, like you were saying, like that's really important. So that's a really good technique for me where I'll show it to a ton of different types of people. And then if everybody points, because some people also just want to have an opinion, so they'll be like, well, change this.
There is a bad kind of
this.
feedback too, yeah.
So the more people that you get, say you get like 5 people, and this guy had a ton to say, and this person had about 3 things to say, and this person had 1 thing to say, et cetera, but then you take an aggregate and you notice that everybody pointed to this one spot.
Yeah.
Then you
go,
go,
pattern.
oh,
yeah.
that one spot across the board was something that was pointed out,
Yeah.
so I actually need to pay attention to that. And then the other ones, it's up to you, your discretion.
Because sometimes it's just an opinion, or it's like you're doing a sad animation, you're like, I don't know, I think they should be happy at that moment. And it's like, okay, you're just giving me a different direction.
Right, like,
Yeah.
This is not your movie or your shot or whatever.
Yeah, like that's a different type of feedback, but then there's the more like, okay, what's your goal? I'm trying to do this. Okay, let's see it. Okay, assuming that's your goal, here's my feedback to help you achieve that goal. And again, going back to Glenn Keane, that was what was so great about working with him, because most of the time when he looks at your shot, he sees what your choices you're making and what you're trying to do. And he's like, okay, let's try to make this work.
Plus that.
So it almost felt like he doesn't scrap your idea, but he's like, if you're trying to do this, here's how this can go better. So then you have an experience of trying one of your ideas, it sucks, but then someone showed you how it could not suck, and then you learn more that way versus, oh, well that sucks, do this instead. If you get that kind of feedback, like, okay, I guess my ideas just suck. It's like, well, maybe they don't suck. It's just you don't know how to make it not suck. Like your idea maybe it was a good idea, but you didn't know how to present it in a way that people could get on board with it.
That's the friendly way Glenn Keane would say it. It's like, you just don't know how to make it not suck.
Yeah. He's like,
wow, I still feel good about myself.
He's
Thanks,
like,
Glenn.
and here's the unsuck.
Yeah.
But there was something about that felt so, like, it was just so, there was something, you learned a lot from that, just about how to make your own ideas work, I guess, if that makes sense.
So Joe, let me transition a little bit here, because we have some patrons who have a question for you, one so far. So for those who don't know, Shot Talk has a Patreon, and if you're a member of that, you can actually join a private Discord group. So we actually have a question for you from that Discord group.
Ooh. I'm so nervous.
So this is coming from a guy by the name of Fantashow.
Oh no.
Whose real name might be Nathan, we're not sure. And he says, to Joe Bowers, what do you think are the most important things to keep in mind when setting up or staging a shot in animation?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He gotcha. He got a gotcha question.
Damn. Obviously, the shots surrounding it, the context of that shot in the whole sequence of shots, the staging of that, assuming you're on a production where the layout has been done and that's all been figured out. But if you're working on your own short, you want to make sure that you have figured out the staging, the point of that shot, right? Like, what is the goal of this shot? And where do the characters need to be? And how does that help them flow into the next shots? How does that help tell the story of the whole sequence? Usually the layout will give you, or the storyboards give you, the composition already, like the staging of it. And then you want to make sure that that still works when you actually go in there and physically animate it, right? So, because I was working on a shot like that where the Flynn tackling the horse in Tangled, and there's like, I set it up, I block it where he runs up and he catches the horse, and it's like this leapfrog effect where they're going over each other. But so there's this relationship with what's on screen where they're going back and then one gets forward. So if you just think about what's moving on the screen without looking at background or anything, something is getting in front of the other and then moving back and getting in front of the other and moving back. The layout camera may not work for what you're going to animate because it has to be a process, I guess. It has to be a back and forth process. So
I have a question from Mario's the Man 117. And he asks, no, I'm just kidding. I just want to know, Joe. I always like to ask this of people because usually it feels that people have, there's always like a film or something that sort of is a sort of a key moment when in development as an artist where it's like, oh man, this is exciting, this is magical, I want to be a part of this. And I always like to ask that of people and artists. Like, what was that? Was there a moment in the movie theater where your brain suddenly flipped a switch and you're like, oh, I want to be a part of this whole world, of this whole scene? If there's a film like that for you, even a TV show or even a cartoon.
Yeah, I don't want to say Star Wars because I was too young and that was just like, playtime, yay, you know.
Yeah.
Jurassic Park was the one that hit again. Yeah, where that came out and it blew my mind. And it wasn't just because it was dinosaurs, because you didn't see a lot of dinosaurs in the movie. If you actually watch it, there's very little dinosaur time. It's the anticipation to build up. They created this feeling of this park, this world, and it's dangerous and it's scary and there's things lurking and some are super dangerous and you haven't even seen them yet. You don't see the raptors till near like almost the end, right? Yeah, you just see like,
you see the destroyed cage.
Yeah, you see them feed the bushes moving, and
Right.
you see an eye maybe in the beginning, and a guy gets pulled in, but it's that mystery, that intrigue. It's like it inspired the imagination.
I think it was an accident on Jaws, and then he did it deliberately on Jurassic Park because he just couldn't get the fucking shark to do what it was supposed to do, and then it ended up working. Because you saw very little of Jaws or the actual monster.
I wish they did it more because it's cheaper to do this.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah, you just have to. It's harder as well because you have to tell a better story that teases the people. It makes you excited, anticipation, I guess, right? And then when you do see something is more special. The special effect is more special. Right now, it's not really that special anymore.
I think Jurassic Park for me was. Yeah, is that the same? Jurassic Park for me was huge. Yeah, I think that and Toy Story, the first one.
That was
what attracted me to CG for sure.
That's when I thought I think I could, because Jurassic Park I didn't really realize fully that was CG. I thought they had giant robots because they did, but they weren't the ones walking. Like the T-Rex was CG sometimes, but I thought it was a real robot because I was 10. But Toy Story was the one where I'm like, oh, like, because I got a copy of 3D Studio Max for DOS kind of after that. And I'm playing
DOS?
For DOS.
What?
In high school, someone gave me 32 discs, 1.25 floppies.
32 floppies?
And I had to do this to install it. It was pirated, right? And I was rendering spheres and trying to make, but anyways, so I saw Toy Story, I'm like, because I can't, at the time, like, I'm like, I can't draw well, so I was a kid that drew in high school, but I'm like nowhere near. You look at
you look at Disney and you think
and you didn't, and I didn't have enough mentoring to say you could actually get there if you do this. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I saw the CG. I'm like, I could maybe do that, and it kind of planted a seed that bloomed later. But like with the 2D stuff, you would see behind the scenes, the 9 old men, here's Milt Kahl working on Lady and the Tramp, and he's like flipping, he's like, oh, hi there. And he's drawing, and you see like, it's cleanup, and he's just kind of going over this pencil like,
oh, right.
And it's not what it looked like when they drew it. I mean, maybe Milt Kahl was pretty precise.
Already done.
Yeah, but you see like a Frank or Ollie drawing, and they're like trying to figure shit out, and it's like a mess, but they knowing that there's a struggle to find the drawing, like as a kid, we didn't know that.
Right.
And then you would see.
So you try to draw the final drawing on the first.
Yeah, you didn't know how
right?
to draw basically because the videos were actually damaging it away. Like, oh, here's Eric Goldberg drawing the Genie, and now Eric Goldberg is kind of unique when he draws. He does do it like that, like one line, and it looks like cleanup for the most part, right? He's just precise, but that's rare because you see other animators, and it's very loose and rough, and it's amazing to see. But
also, as a kid, you don't realize that they've logged in 50,000 hours.
That's the other thing,
of drawing at that point in their
career.
So
just like a young kid without the internet, you don't know these things. So I'm just like, well, I'm not good enough for that,
Right.
So
yeah.
So anyways, I guess my point was CG. I was like, I think I could do that because it's like it's like stop motion in the computer.
Right.
And you can undo something.
Right. Well, Joe, thanks for being on the show, and always good talking to you.
Yeah, this was fun.
Yeah, regardless of whether or not there's a camera and microphones on us.
Yeah,
so,
we should have all conversations like this.
We should always talk about animation with every conversation forever.
Yeah.
And but seriously, thanks for being on the show, and talked about a lot of fun stuff today. A lot of informative stuff, I would say, and so hopefully the viewers got something out of this. And yeah, we'll have to have it back on in the future at some point.
Absolutely,
So,
yeah. This was a lot of fun.
Awesome.
So,
All right.
Great.
We will see you guys next week. Take it easy.
Later.
If you'd like to see more of Joe's work, you can find him on Twitter at Joe_Bows. Also, if you're enjoying this music, you can follow me at inexpensivejew.bandcamp.com. And finally, if you've enjoyed this episode of Shot Talk and would like to see more episodes in the future, please consider contributing to the Shot Talk Patreon. You can sign up today at patreon.com/shottalk. There are all types of rewards, like receiving episodes early, access to private Discord servers, and more. Thanks for listening. Catch you next time.